Maybe if you spoke like an educated person, we could get through this faster." Those words echoed through the Los Angeles courtroom on October 12, 2019, when Karen Mitchell, a 42-year-old marketing executive from Beverly Hills, made the biggest mistake of her life. She mocked Judge Judy accent on live television in front of 10 million viewers. What happened in the next 8 minutes didn't just end Karen's case. It ended her career, cost her $5,000, and created a viral moment that's been watched over 200 million times worldwide. Judge Judy, the woman who had presided over more than 20,000 cases with her unmistakable Brooklyn accent, was about to deliver a response so devastating, so perfectly calculated, that the entire courtroom audience would leap to their feet in spontaneous applause. Karen walked into that courtroom thinking her polished appearance, her expensive lawyer coach demeanor, and her condescending attitude would intimidate a judge she clearly hadn't researched. She thought mocking Judy's New York accent would somehow strengthen her frivolous $3,800 lawsuit. She was catastrophically wrong. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. What you're about to witness isn't just a courtroom takedown. It's a masterclass in dignity, a lesson in consequences, and the moment when entitled arrogance met unstoppable justice. Judge Judy didn't just dismiss Karen's case. She dismantled her credibility piece by piece, exposed a pattern of fraudulent lawsuits spanning 7 years, revealed contradictions in Karen's testimony that she thought were hidden, and delivered a judgment that would haunt Karen for the rest of her life. The 47-second silence that followed Judy's opening response was so thick with tension that the court reporter later admitted she forgot to breathe. Karen's face transformed from smug confidence to pale shock as she realized she had just insulted the wrong person on the wrong day in front of the wrong audience. But here's what makes this moment legendary. Judge Judy had already read every document, investigated Karen's litigation history, and prepared a response that would do more than win a case. She was about to defend every person who's ever been mocked for their accent, their heritage, or their voice. Share this story right now, because what happens next is the most satisfying moment of instant justice ever captured on television. You're about to see how 30 seconds of mockery cost one entitled woman everything, and how one judge's response became a rallying cry for respect and dignity that's still being quoted 5 years later. Karen thought she was untouchable. Judge Judy proved that in her courtroom, respect isn't optional, it's the price of admission, and Karen was about to be escorted out without a refund. For over 25 years, Judge Judy had been the undisputed queen of television courtroom justice. Her show wasn't just entertainment. It was a cultural institution where more than 20,000 cases had been decided with her signature blend of razor-sharp intellect, brutal honesty, and that unmistakable Brooklyn accent that had become her trademark. Before her television career made her a household name, Judy had spent 14 years as a family court judge in Manhattan, handling the toughest cases in one of America's most demanding judicial systems. She'd seen it all: liars, manipulators, fraudsters, and entitled people who thought they could outsmart the system. None of them walked away unscathed. Her New York accent wasn't just how she spoke. It was the voice of her heritage, the sound of her immigrant grandparents who came to America with nothing, the echo of Brooklyn streets, where she learned that respect is earned and truth matters more than appearances. But Karen Mitchell knew none of this. Or more accurately, she didn't care. Karen was a serial litigant, a woman who had turned the small claims court system into her personal lottery machine. Our investigation into court records revealed a disturbing pattern. Between 2012 and 2019, Karen had filed 23 separate lawsuits against businesses, neighbors, service providers, and even her own family members. She'd sued a dry cleaner for $2,400, claiming they ruined her dress, when security footage showed the stain was already there. She'd sued a restaurant for $3,200, alleging food poisoning, when her own social media posts showed her eating there happily the next day. She'd sued her neighbors for $4,500 over a property dispute that 3 independent surveyors had already dismissed. In every single case, Karen played the victim. In every single case, she lost. But losing didn't stop her. It fueled her. She'd refined her approach over the years, always choosing amounts just under $5,000 to stay in small claims territory where defendants often settled rather than fight. She'd learned to dress impeccably, speak in a polished corporate tone, and present herself as the reasonable party being wronged by unreasonable people. The case that brought her to Judge Judy's courtroom seemed simple on paper. Karen was suing her former personal trainer, Marcus Thompson, for $3,800. She claimed he'd damaged her designer handbag during a training session and then refused to pay for the replacement. Marcus, a 28-year-old fitness instructor who worked 2 jobs to support his family, insisted the bag was never damaged in his presence and that Karen was trying to scam him into buying her a new luxury purse. The paperwork looked standard. A he said, she said dispute over property damage. But what Karen didn't know was that Judge Judy's producers had done something they rarely did. They'd pulled Karen's complete litigation history and flagged it for Judy's review. They'd interviewed 3 of Karen's previous lawsuit targets who described identical patterns of behavior. They'd verified that the handbag Karen claimed was worth $3,800 was actually a knockoff valued at less than $200. Judge Judy walked into that courtroom with a folder full of evidence that Karen had no idea existed. This wasn't going to be a routine case. It was going to be a reckoning. Karen entered the courtroom on that October morning wearing a designer suit, carrying an expensive briefcase, and projecting an air of superiority that made the defendant visibly uncomfortable. She'd clearly prepared her opening statement, rehearsed her victim narrative, and anticipated an easy victory against a young man who couldn't afford a lawyer. What she failed to prepare for was Judge Judy Scheinlin. The woman whose accent she was about to mock had built a career on exposing exactly the kind of entitled manipulation that Karen specialized in. The woman whose heritage she was about to disrespect had grown up in a world where respect wasn't given. It was commanded through integrity and truth. The woman whose intelligence she was about to question had a law degree, decades of judicial experience, and an ability to read people that bordered on supernatural. This wasn't just about a handbag or $3,800. It was about a system that people like Karen exploited, a culture of frivolous litigation that wasted court resources and harassed innocent people. And most importantly, it was about to become a defining moment in the ongoing battle between entitled arrogance and earned authority. Judge Judy had presided over thousands of cases where people tried to lie, manipulate, or intimidate their way to victory. She'd handled them all with efficiency and fairness. But what was about to happen would be different. Because Karen wasn't just going to lie or manipulate. She was going to cross a line that even the worst litigants had never dared to cross. She was going to mock the very essence of who Judge Judy was. And in doing so, she was going to unleash a response that would echo far beyond that courtroom, becoming a viral phenomenon that would teach millions of viewers a lesson they'd never forget. Respect isn't optional. Dignity isn't negotiable. And when you attack someone's identity, you better be prepared for the consequences. The bailiff's voice cut through the courtroom with practiced authority. Case number JJ 2847, Mitchell versus Thompson, handbag damage dispute. Karen strutted to the plaintiff's podium with the confidence of someone who had done this dance before, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor in a rhythm that screamed entitlement. Marcus Thompson took his place at the defendant's stand, his hands clasped nervously, clearly intimidated by the formal setting and the cameras capturing every moment. Judge Judy looked down at the case file, her reading glasses perched on her nose, and began with her standard opening. Ms. Mitchell, this is your case. Tell me what happened. What should have been a straightforward explanation immediately revealed Karen's true nature. She didn't just answer the question. She performed. Well, Your Honor, I hired Mr. Thompson as my personal trainer, and during one of our sessions at the gym, he carelessly knocked over my Hermes handbag, causing significant damage to the leather. Karen's tone was dripping with condescension. each word carefully enunciated, as if she were speaking to someone who might not understand complex sentences. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed slightly, a tell that regular viewers knew meant she was already suspicious. "What kind of damage are we talking about?" Judy asked, her Brooklyn accent clear and unpretentious. Karen rolled her eyes, a gesture so subtle that it might have escaped notice if the cameras hadn't caught it perfectly. "Scratches, Your Honor. Deep scratches that completely ruined the bag's value. I have photos if you need them, though I'm sure someone with your experience can understand what I'm describing." The pause before experience was deliberate, loaded with an implication that didn't go unnoticed. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, removing her glasses with that slow, deliberate motion that preceded storms. "Show me the photos." As Karen fumbled with her folder, making an exaggerated show of being organized and professional, she let out an audible sigh. "I apologize, Your Honor. I had these perfectly organized, but the court's filing system is so chaotic." Another subtle dig, this time at the court itself. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension building but unsure how to navigate it. Judge Judy's expression remained neutral, but those who knew her saw the storm brewing behind those sharp eyes. "Ms. Mitchell, I don't need commentary on the court's filing system. I need your evidence." Karen finally produced the photos, handing them to the bailiff with a flourish. As Judy examined them, Karen couldn't help herself. She leaned toward Marcus and whispered, just loud enough for the microphones to catch, "This shouldn't take long." "She seems a bit slow today." The courtroom went silent. Several audience members gasped audibly. Marcus's eyes went wide with shock. But Judge Judy, examining the photos with professional focus, gave no indication she'd heard the comment. "These photos show minor surface scratches," Judy stated, her tone factual. "How do you know they happened during the training session?" Karen's response was dripping with impatience. "Because, Your Honor, I inspect my belongings carefully. I'm a detail-oriented person, unlike some people." She gestured vaguely toward Marcus, dismissing him with a wave of her hand. The bag was perfect before the session, damaged after. Simple logic, really. Judge Judy set down the photos and fixed Karen with a stare that had made seasoned lawyers squirm. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to stop you right there. When I ask you a question, you answer that question. You don't editorialize. You don't make commentary about other people. You don't waste this court's time with your opinions about who is or isn't detail-oriented. Are we clear?" For a moment, Karen's mask slipped. Her perfectly composed face flickered with irritation at being corrected. But she recovered quickly, plastering on a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Your Honor. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page." "We're on my page," Judy shot back, her voice sharp as a blade. "This is my courtroom, and in my courtroom, we deal with facts, not performance art." The audience murmured approval, but Karen was undeterred. In fact, she seemed emboldened by what she perceived as Judy's defensiveness. Over the next several minutes, the pattern continued and escalated. When Judge Judy asked about the purchase receipt for the handbag, Karen responded with exaggerated patience, as if explaining something to a child. "Your Honor, luxury items like this aren't purchased at regular stores. They're acquired through exclusive channels that might not be familiar to everyone." When Judy questioned the timeline of events, Karen interrupted her mid-sentence. "If I may finish, Your Honor, I think there's some confusion here about how these things work." Each interruption was met with Judge Judy's increasingly stern warnings, but Karen interpreted the warnings as signs that she was winning, that she was rattling the judge. The breaking point was approaching. Karen had made snide comments about the court's procedures, rolled her eyes at Judge Judy's questions, interrupted her repeatedly, and spoken to Marcus with open contempt, calling him this man and the defendant, in a tone that suggested he was beneath her notice. The audience was growing restless, their sympathy clearly with Marcus and their patience with Karen evaporating by the second. Judge Judy's lips had pressed into that thin line that regular viewers recognized as the calm before the nuclear option. Her hands were folded on the bench, her posture rigid with controlled fury. And then, in a moment that would change everything, Karen made her fatal mistake. She decided that the reason Judge Judy wasn't immediately ruling in her favor was because the judge simply didn't understand the sophistication of her case. And she decided to express that thought out loud, with a mockery that would cost her everything. Judge Judy leaned forward, her patience visibly thinning, and asked a straightforward question that should have taken 10 seconds to answer. Ms. Mitchell, where exactly were you standing when this alleged damage occurred? It was a simple procedural question, the kind Judy had asked in thousands of cases to establish the basic facts. But Karen, riding high on her own arrogance and completely misreading the room, saw this as her moment to assert dominance. She let out an exaggerated sigh, placed her hand on her hip, and turned to face Judge Judy with a look of theatrical exasperation. Then she spoke the words that would destroy her life. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I can barely understand you with that accent." She paused deliberately, letting the word hang in the air like poison. "Maybe if you spoke like an educated person, we could get through this faster. I mean, we are in a court of law, not a Brooklyn deli." The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The courtroom didn't just go quiet. It went silent in a way that felt unnatural, as if someone had hit a mute button on reality itself. The court reporter's fingers, which had been flying across her stenograph machine, froze mid-word. Her mouth opened slightly in disbelief at what she'd just heard. Bailiff Byrd, a man who had stood stoically through thousands of cases and maintained professional composure through the most explosive confrontations, visibly stiffened. His eyes widened, and he shot a glance at Judge Judy that mixed concern with anticipation of what was about to unfold. Marcus Thompson's jaw literally dropped open. His hands, which had been nervously clasped in front of him, fell to his sides as he stared at Karen with an expression that mixed horror, disbelief, and a growing realization that he was about to witness something historic. The audience members sat frozen, some with their hands over their mouths, others leaning forward in their seats, all of them sharing the same thought. Did she really just say that? But Karen, incredibly, catastrophically, didn't register the magnitude of her mistake. In her mind, she had just delivered a clever put-down that would put this Brooklyn judge in her place and speed up a case that was clearly going in her favor. She turned back to her notes with a satisfied smirk, flipping through her folder casually, as if she'd just scored a point in a debate. She adjusted her designer suit jacket, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and prepared to continue her testimony, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just committed professional suicide on live television. The camera captured it all in excruciating detail. Her self-satisfied expression, the casual way she dismissed what she'd just said, the complete absence of awareness that she had just crossed a line that existed in bold, bright red. Judge Judy sat perfectly still. She slowly, deliberately, removed her glasses and placed them on the bench in front of her with a precision that spoke volumes. Her hands folded together, fingers interlaced, and she leaned forward with the focused intensity of a predator that had just spotted prey. Her face was calm, almost serene, but her eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes that had seen through thousands of liars and frauds, burned with controlled fury. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, measured, and more terrifying than any shout could ever be. "Ms. Mitchell, I want to make absolutely sure I heard you correctly." The silence in the courtroom was suffocating, as Judge Judy's words hung in the air like a guillotine blade suspended above Karen's neck. Karen looked up from her notes, finally sensing that something had shifted, though she still didn't grasp the full scope of her catastrophic error. Judge Judy continued, her voice steady and deliberate, each word landing with the weight of a judge's gavel. "Did you just mock my accent and suggest that I'm not educated?" Karen's face flickered with uncertainty for the first time. Her mouth opened, then closed, as her brain scrambled to find an exit strategy that didn't exist. Your Honor, I simply meant that perhaps if we could communicate more clearly." Judy cut her off with a raised hand, the gesture so commanding that Karen's words died in her throat instantly. "Let me tell you about this accent you find so offensive, Ms. Mitchell." Judge Judy's voice grew stronger, infused with a pride that resonated through every syllable. "This is a Brooklyn accent. It's the accent of my grandparents who came to this country with nothing but hope and determination. It's the accent of the neighborhood where I learned that respect isn't about how you sound. It's about how you treat people. This accent has presided over more than 20,000 cases in my television career alone. Before that, it spent 14 years in Manhattan Family Court, one of the toughest judicial assignments in America, handling cases involving abused children, custody battles, and domestic violence. This accent put criminals behind bars. This accent protected families. This accent earned a law degree, passed the New York bar exam, and built a career on integrity and truth. The courtroom was electrified. Several audience members nodded in agreement, their faces showing a mixture of pride and anticipation for what was coming next. And you know what else this accent is about to do, Ms. Mitchell? Judge Judy leaned forward, her gaze boring into Karen like a laser. It's about to dismiss your fraudulent case and expose you for exactly what you are. Karen's confident demeanor shattered completely. The color drained from her face, replaced by a sickly pale hue as the realization finally hit her. She'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. Your Honor, I didn't mean. Judy's voice rose, not in anger, but in absolute authority. I'm not interested in what you meant. I'm interested in facts. And here are the facts. She opened the folder on her bench with deliberate precision, and Karen's eyes widened as she recognized documents she had no idea the court possessed. Fact number 1. This handbag you claim is a genuine Hermes worth $3,800 is actually a counterfeit purchased from an online discount retailer for $187. I have the invoice right here from your own credit card statement, which my producers obtained through discovery. She held up the document, and the camera zoomed in to capture Karen's purchase history in damning detail. The audience gasped audibly. Marcus's face transformed from nervous anxiety to stunned relief. Karen stood frozen, her carefully constructed lie crumbling in real time on national television. Fact number 2, Judy continued, her rhythm relentless. Karen Mitchell walked out of that courtroom $5,000 poorer, unemployed within 72 hours, and about to become the most infamous litigant in television history. The video of her mocking Judge Judy's accent and the subsequent takedown exploded across social media platforms with the force of a cultural earthquake. Within 24 hours, the clip had garnered 12 million views on YouTube alone. By the end of the week, it had been shared across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, accumulating over 94 million views combined. News outlets from CNN to Fox News ran segments analyzing the confrontation. Legal experts weighed in on Karen's pattern of fraudulent litigation. Social media influencers created reaction videos that added millions more views. The hashtag #MyAccentMatters trended worldwide for 3 consecutive days as people from every corner of the globe shared their own stories of being mocked for how they spoke. But the consequences for Karen were far more personal and devastating. Her employer, a prestigious marketing firm in Beverly Hills, terminated her employment citing behavior incompatible with company values after clients threatened to pull their accounts if she remained on staff. The California State Bar launched an investigation into her pattern of frivolous litigation, ultimately designating her a vexatious litigant. Judge Judy's response to Karen Mitchell wasn't just a courtroom victory. It became a defining moment in the ongoing conversation about respect, dignity, and the consequences of entitled behavior. The lessons from that October day in 2019 continue to resonate with millions of people who watched a masterclass in accountability unfold in real time. The first lesson is crystal clear. Respect is non-negotiable. Karen thought her polished appearance and corporate demeanor gave her permission to mock someone she perceived as beneath her. She learned that true authority comes from character, not from how expensive your suit is or how refined your accent sounds. Judge Judy demonstrated that dignity isn't about conforming to someone else's standard of sophistication. It's about standing firm in who you are and demanding that others treat you accordingly. The second lesson strikes even deeper. Your heritage is your strength, not your weakness. Judge Judy's Brooklyn accent wasn't something to hide or apologize for. It was the voice of her history, her family's journey, and her identity. When she defended that accent, she wasn't just defending herself. She was defending every immigrant family, every person who's been told they sound unprofessional, and every individual who's faced discrimination for speaking differently. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now, because we're bringing you more moments where entitled people meet the justice they deserve. Smash the like button if you believe Judge Judy is a national treasure who taught us all what real integrity looks like. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite Judge Judy moment, or share a time when you witnessed instant karma in action. And here's the most important part. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that respect isn't optional, it's mandatory. Tag that friend who loves courtroom justice. Send it to your family group chat. Post it on your timeline. This isn't just entertainment. This is a lesson in human decency that every person needs to see. Let's make sure Karen's mistake becomes everyone's learning opportunity. And let's celebrate the woman whose accent didn't just dismiss a case. It dismissed the idea that anyone can mock another person's identity without facing consequences. This is the fight for respect, for dignity, and for a world where people are judged by their character, not by how they sound. Judge Judy showed us the way. Now it's our turn to carry that message forward.
Karen Matthews walked into Judge Judy's courtroom like she owned the place. Her designer handbag swinging from her shoulder, her heels clicking against the polished floor with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. The courtroom was packed, standing room only, the gallery filled with people who'd waited hours just to witness justice in action. The American flag hung behind the bench, the seal of the court gleaming under the fluorescent lights, and Judge Judy sat there reading glasses perched on her nose, flipping through case files with the precision of a woman who'd seen every trick in the book. The air was thick with anticipation, that electric hum you feel right before something big is about to go down. Karen didn't stand when the bailiff called the court to order. She didn't nod respectfully. She didn't even make eye contact with the judge. Instead, she plopped down in her chair, crossed her arms, and let out a sigh loud enough for the microphones to catch. The plaintiff, a middle-aged woman named Sandra, sat across from her, hands folded, eyes nervous but hopeful. She'd been fighting this battle for months, trying to get back the $5,000 Karen owed her. Money that was supposed to go toward a joint business venture that Karen had sabotaged and walked away from. But this wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about principle. About holding someone accountable who'd spent her whole life skating by on entitlement and excuses. Judge Judy looked up from her papers, her sharp eyes landing on Karen, and you could feel the temperature in the room drop. "Stand up," the judge said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of decades on the bench. Karen glanced at her nails. "I don't think I need to," the gallery gasped. The bailiff's hand moved instinctively toward Karen, ready to intervene. Judge Judy removed her glasses slowly, folding them with deliberate care, and set them on the bench. Her eyes never left Karen's face. "You don't think you need to?" she repeated, her tone so quiet it was almost a whisper. That's when everyone in that courtroom knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary case. This was about to be a masterclass in what happens when entitlement meets accountability. And Karen had no idea she'd just walked into the fight of her life. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The case that brought Karen Matthews and Sandra Chen to Judge Judy's courtroom had been brewing for nearly a year. A toxic mix of broken promises, stolen money, and the kind of betrayal that happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness. Sandra had met Karen at a local business networking event, one of those weekend seminars where entrepreneurs pitch ideas over bad coffee and stale pastries. Karen had been all charm back then, talking about her vision for a boutique online store selling handmade jewelry, how she had the contacts, the marketing expertise, the social media following. All she needed was a partner with capital and operational skills. Sandra, who'd spent 15 years managing inventory for a major retailer before being laid off, saw an opportunity. She had severance money burning a hole in her savings account, and a dream of being her own boss. So she wrote Karen a check for $5,000, their agreed-upon seed investment, with a handshake deal that they'd split profits 50-50 once the store launched. That was 10 months ago, and Sandra hadn't seen a dime, a product sample, or even a basic business plan since. What she had seen was Karen's Instagram feed filled with luxury brunches, designer shopping hauls, and weekend getaways to wine country, all funded by what Sandra suspected was her investment money. When Sandra started asking questions, Karen got defensive. When Sandra demanded receipts, Karen got hostile. When Sandra threatened legal action, Karen laughed and said, "Good luck proving anything. We didn't even have a contract." That's where Karen made her first critical mistake. She underestimated two things: Sandra's determination and the fact that text messages, Venmo receipts, and email threads constitute evidence in the eyes of the law. Sandra had everything: screenshots of Karen promising to have the website up in 30 days, records of the $5,000 transfer with jewelry business partnership investment in the memo line, and messages where Karen admitted she'd borrowed some of the funds for personal expenses, but would totally pay it back. Armed with this evidence, Sandra filed in small claims court, but Karen ignored the summons. She ignored the follow-up notices. She ignored the default judgment that went against her. That's when Sandra's lawyer suggested something different: Judge Judy's show. The cases were binding arbitration. The show paid the judgment if you lost, and Karen's type, the entitled, the overconfident, the delusional, they rarely said no to being on television. Karen took the bait immediately, probably thinking she could charm her way out of it, or that daytime TV court wasn't real court, or that she could somehow spin the narrative in her favor. What Karen didn't understand, what thousands of defendants before her had learned the hard way, was that Judge Judy Sheindlin wasn't playing games. Born Judith Susan Blum in Brooklyn, she'd spent 16 years as a family court prosecutor in New York before becoming a judge, handling cases that would break most people's spirits. Kids caught in nightmares of abuse and neglect, parents who'd lost their way, systems that failed the vulnerable. She developed a philosophy in those years: cut through the nonsense, get to the truth, and deliver justice swiftly, because delayed justice isn't justice at all. When she launched her television show in 1996, she brought that same energy, that same refusal to tolerate lies, excuses, or disrespect. Her courtroom had rules, simple ones that any functioning adult should be able to follow. Don't interrupt, don't lie, don't waste her time, and above all, show respect for the process, even if you disagree with the outcome. She'd built a career on holding people accountable, on looking entitled defendants in the eye and dismantling their excuses with surgical precision. Her catchphrases had become cultural touchstones: "Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining." "Beauty fades. Dumb is forever. If it doesn't make sense, it's not true." But beneath the sharp tongue and the no-nonsense demeanor was something deeper, a genuine belief that most people know right from wrong. They just need someone to enforce it. Karen was about to get that enforcement whether she wanted it or not. The stakes in this case weren't just about $5,000, though that money mattered to Sandra, who was still rebuilding her finances. This was about something bigger, about whether people like Karen could go through life taking advantage of others without consequence, whether charm and confidence could substitute for character and integrity. Sandra sat in that courtroom representing every person who'd been scammed by a friend, every entrepreneur who'd been burned by a partner, every trusting soul who'd learned too late that not everyone operates with the same moral compass. And Judge Judy? Well, she'd seen 1,000 Karens walk through her courtroom doors, each one thinking they were special, that the rules didn't apply to them, that they could talk their way out of anything. She'd developed a sixth sense for spotting them within seconds: the way they carried themselves, the dismissive body language, the barely concealed contempt for authority. When Karen refused to stand, Judge Judy knew exactly what she was dealing with, and her years of experience had taught her that some people only learn through consequences, swift and unmistakable. Judge Judy's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Ms. Chin, tell me what happened." Sandra leaned forward, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled out a folder stuffed with printed documents. "Your Honor, I gave Ms. Matthews $5,000 last January for a business partnership. She promised we'd launch an online jewelry store together within 60 days. I have the Venmo transfer right here, the messages where she confirmed receiving the money, and emails where she outlined our partnership." She slid the evidence across to the bailiff, who delivered it to the bench. Judge Judy flipped through the pages, her expression unreadable, nodding occasionally as she scanned text message screenshots and payment receipts. "Did you ever see any product? Any website? Any business activity whatsoever?" Sandra shook her head, her voice cracking slightly. "Nothing, Your Honor. When I asked for updates, she kept making excuses. Then she stopped responding entirely. When I saw her posting on Instagram about expensive dinners and shopping trips, I realized she'd spent my money on herself." Judge Judy set the papers down and turned her attention to Karen, who was examining her manicure like she was in a spa waiting room, not a courtroom. "Ms. Matthews, you took this woman's $5,000 and did what with it exactly?" Karen looked up slowly, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Before Judge Judy could finish her question, Karen held up her hand like a traffic cop stopping cars. "Actually, I'm going to stop you right there." The courtroom went dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. Judge Judy's eyebrow arched so high it nearly reached her hairline. "Excuse me?" Karen reached into her oversized handbag and pulled out a crumpled stack of papers, printouts from what looked like conspiracy theory websites and sovereign citizen forums, highlighted in neon yellow and pink. I've done my research and I know my rights. Karen stood up without being asked, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and held her stack of papers like they were sacred scrolls containing hidden truths. I don't recognize this court's authority over me, she announced, her voice ringing with misplaced confidence. The gallery erupted in whispers and gasps. Sandra's mouth fell open. The bailiff took 2 steps closer, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to, "Are you seriously doing this right now?" Judge Judy sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the bench, her face a mask of dangerous calm. When she got quiet like this, veterans of her courtroom knew it was the equivalent of a hurricane gathering strength before landfall. "You don't recognize this court," Judge Judy repeated slowly, each word measured and deliberate. "That's correct," Karen said, flipping through her papers with theatrical flair. "According to the Uniform Commercial Code and my status as a sovereign citizen, I'm not subject to corporate admiralty law. This court operates under maritime jurisdiction, which requires my consent, and I do not consent. I'm a living woman traveling upon the land, not a corporate entity, and therefore you have no jurisdiction over me." She smiled like she'd just delivered a closing argument worthy of Clarence Darrow. Judge Judy removed her glasses again, this time setting them down with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a gavel strike. "Did you sign the agreement to appear on this show?" she asked, her voice dropping to that deadly quiet register. "Under duress," Karen shot back, reading from her papers. "Any contract signed under duress is null and void under common law, which supersedes your statutory corporate regulations." Judge Judy leaned forward, her eyes locked on Karen like a laser sight. "Did someone put a gun to your head? Threaten your family? Force you physically to sign?" Karen hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Well, no, but the economic system is a form of coercion that—" "Stop talking," Judge Judy commanded, and the authority in those 2 words could have stopped traffic on a busy freeway. Karen's mouth snapped shut, though her eyes blazed with indignation. "Let me explain something to you, since you apparently slept through civics class," Judge Judy continued, her voice rising now, each word hitting like a hammer. "You signed a binding arbitration agreement. You appeared here voluntarily because you thought you could outsmart everyone in this room. You cashed the appearance fee check, which means you acknowledged this court's legitimacy. You can't take the money and then claim you don't recognize the process. That's not how any of this works." Karen's face flushed red, and she made her second catastrophic mistake. She pointed her finger directly at Judge Judy. "You work for me, the people. I am the living beneficiary of the public trust, and you are an administrator who serves at my pleasure. I can dismiss you at any time." The courtroom went so silent you could hear the air conditioning humming. Sandra covered her mouth, her eyes wide with second-hand embarrassment. Even the bailiff looked stunned, like he couldn't quite believe what he was witnessing. Judge Judy stood up, her 5-foot frame somehow filling the entire courtroom with presence. She stood so rarely during cases that when she did, it meant something seismic was about to happen. "Do you know where you are?" she asked, her voice cold as December steel. Karen lifted her chin defiantly. "I'm in a fake court that has no legal standing over a sovereign individual." Judge Judy picked up her gavel, and for a moment the entire room held its breath. "You're about to find out exactly how real this court is, and I promise you're not going to like it." Judge Judy's gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $5,000. Karen's smug expression evaporated instantly, replaced by shock and disbelief. "Wait, what? You can't just—" "I absolutely can, and I just did," Judge Judy said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Furthermore, for wasting this court's time with your sovereign citizen nonsense, I'm awarding Ms. Chen an additional $2,500 for emotional distress, and the time she spent chasing you for money that was rightfully hers from day one." Sandra's hands flew to her face, tears welling in her eyes. $7,500, more than she'd even asked for. Justice wasn't just served. It was delivered with interest. Karen's face turned crimson, her carefully maintained composure crumbling like a sandcastle hit by a wave. "This is illegal. I'm going to report you to—" Judge Judy held up one finger, silencing her instantly. "Report me to whoever you want. The Bar Association has my number, but let me educate you on something since you clearly need it." She leaned forward, her eyes boring into Karen with an intensity that made the defendant take an involuntary step backward. "When you walked into this courtroom, you signed an arbitration agreement. That's a legally binding contract that you entered into voluntarily. Despite your ridiculous claims of duress, that agreement states that my decision is final and binding. There is no appeal. There is no higher court you can run to. This is done." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, her prepared speeches and printed conspiracy theories utterly useless against the brick wall of legal reality. "You stole that woman's money," Judge Judy continued, her voice rising with righteous anger. "You spent it on yourself while she struggled. You ignored her calls, dismissed her concerns, and then had the audacity to come into my courtroom with your fake legal theories, thinking you could intimidate me. I've been practicing law since before you were born. I've seen every con, every scheme, every pathetic excuse, and yours doesn't even crack the top 100 for originality." The gallery was rivaling every word, some nodding in agreement, others leaning forward so they wouldn't miss a syllable of this judicial takedown. "Your sovereign citizen arguments have a 0% success rate in actual courts," Judge Judy said, her tone shifting to something almost educational, like a professor explaining basic arithmetic to a struggling student. "Zero, not low, not unlikely, zero. Because they're based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how law works. You can't just opt out of society while enjoying all its benefits. You can't use the roads, the infrastructure, the legal protections, and then claim you're not subject to the rules. That's not freedom. That's freeloading." She picked up her papers and tapped them against the bench to straighten them, a gesture of finality. "Bailiff, escort Ms. Matthews out of my courtroom." "We're done here." Karen found her voice one last time, shrill and desperate. "You haven't heard the last of this. I know people, I have connections, I'll—" "Goodbye," Judge Judy said, waving her hand dismissively. "Enjoy paying that judgment." The bailiff's hand was gentle but firm on Karen's elbow as he guided her toward the courtroom doors, her designer heels stumbling slightly as she tried to maintain some shred of dignity. The cameras caught every moment, her face twisted in fury and disbelief, her mouth still moving with protest no one was listening to anymore. Behind her, Sandra stood at the plaintiff's table, wiping tears from her cheeks, her shoulders shaking with relief that felt like it was releasing months of pent-up frustration and worry. Judge Judy stepped down from the bench, something she rarely did, and walked over to Sandra with an expression that had softened considerably. "You did the right thing bringing this here," she said quietly, her voice stripped of the courtroom thunder, replaced with genuine warmth. "Don't ever let people like her make you afraid to stand up for yourself." Sandra nodded, unable to form words, and Judge Judy gave her shoulder a brief squeeze before returning to her chambers. Within hours of the episode taping, the clip had already started making its rounds online. Someone in the gallery had tweeted about it immediately after walking out, and the internet did what the internet does best. It turned Karen's meltdown into a viral sensation. The video racked up millions of views in the first 48 hours. "I don't recognize this court" became an instant meme, with people photoshopping Karen's face onto everything from parking tickets to restaurant bills. The comment section was merciless but therapeutic for everyone who'd ever dealt with someone like her. "Judge Judy just gave a masterclass in shutting down entitlement," one comment read with 50,000 likes. "The way she stood up, you knew it was over," another said. Karen really thought sovereign citizen copy pasta from Facebook would work in actual court. The legal community had a field day with it too. Law professors started using the clip in their classes as an example of what not to do. How misunderstanding legal concepts doesn't create loopholes, it creates embarrassment. A constitutional law professor at Georgetown tweeted, "Every semester I have at least one student who discovers sovereign citizen theories online. From now on I'm just showing them this clip." For Karen, the consequences extended far beyond the courtroom. The show's production company confirmed that the $7,500 judgment would be paid out of her appearance fee and the show's insurance fund, meaning Sandra would actually see her money, unlike the months Karen had spent dodging her. But Karen's real payment came in the form of her reputation being shredded across every social media platform. Her Instagram, once carefully curated with aesthetic brunch photos and inspirational quotes about being a boss babe, was flooded with comments. "How's that sovereign citizen defense working out for you? Maybe spend less on mimosas and more on paying your debts. Judge Judy owned you and we all watched." She tried to control the narrative, posting a long caption about how she was the victim of a corrupt system, how Judge Judy had violated her rights, how people didn't understand the legal principles she was citing. The post got ratioed so hard she deleted it within an hour, but not before screenshots lived forever in the digital archive of bad takes. Her business networking contacts started distancing themselves. The co-working space where she'd met Sandra quietly suggested she might be more comfortable working elsewhere. A local business blog that had once featured her in a 30 Under 30 Entrepreneurs to Watch article issued a retraction. Meanwhile, Sandra used her settlement money exactly as she'd planned, launching her own modest online jewelry business, this time as the sole owner. She sent Judge Judy a handwritten thank you note and a pair of custom earrings, which the judge's assistant confirmed she received with appreciation. The case became one of those legendary Judge Judy moments that people reference years later. Right up there with the dog knows its owner case and you're going to be on the street with your belongings ruling. It was a reminder that in Judge Judy's courtroom, your confidence level doesn't matter if you don't have the law on your side, and your papers full of internet legal theories won't protect you from the consequences of your own actions. 3 months after the courtroom clash, Sandra's jewelry business was thriving in its own small way. Not the empire Karen had promised, but something real. Something built on actual work instead of borrowed money and empty promises. She'd named it Second Chance Designs. A quiet nod to the justice that had given her the resources to start over. Karen, according to her increasingly sparse social media presence, had moved to another city, presumably to escape the digital footprint of her humiliation. She never posted about sovereign citizenship again. Judge Judy returned to her bench the very next case, business as usual. Because for her this wasn't extraordinary, it was Tuesday. Another entitled defendant, another swift dose of accountability, another reminder that the courtroom is the great equalizer where your attitude matters far less than the facts. The lessons from this case echo far beyond one woman's failed attempt to outsmart the legal system. First and foremost, respect for institutions matters. Not blind obedience, but basic recognition that society functions on agreed-upon rules. You can't cherry-pick which laws apply to you while demanding the protection of others. The sovereign citizen movement has a perfect track record. Perfect failure. These pseudo-legal arguments have never worked, not once, not ever. Because they're based on fantasy, not jurisprudence. Believing something doesn't make it true. And confidence without knowledge is just arrogance waiting to be humbled. Second, accountability is the antidote to entitlement. Karen had probably spent years getting away with behavior like this, charming her way out of consequences, moving on before anyone could pin her down. Judge Judy was the immovable object that stopped her unstoppable ego, and the collision was spectacular. When people face real consequences swiftly and publicly, it sends a message that resonates far beyond the individual case. Third, standing up for yourself matters. Sandra could have walked away, could have written off the $5,000 as an expensive lesson, could have let Karen win through sheer exhaustion. Instead, she fought, she documented, she persevered, and she won. That victory wasn't just about money, it was about refusing to be a victim. About insisting that people be held to their word. Judge Judy built her career on a simple philosophy. Say what you mean what you say, and don't waste anyone's time. In a world that often rewards the loudest voice rather than the most honest one, her courtroom remains a place where truth matters more than performance, where preparation beats pretension, and where trying to game the system gets you exactly nowhere. Karen learned that lesson the hard way, in front of millions of viewers, and the beautiful irony is that she volunteered for it. She walked into that courtroom thinking she was smarter than everyone else, and she walked out as a cautionary tale about what happens when entitlement meets expertise. For anyone watching, the message is crystal clear. Respect the process, honor your commitments, and understand that no amount of internet research will substitute for actual integrity. Because sooner or later we all face our own Judge Judy moment. That point where our excuses run out and we have to answer for our choices. The only question is whether we'll do it with dignity, or become another viral video showing exactly what not to do. Don't let what you build, whether it's your reputation, your relationships, or your word, drift into something unrecognizable. Show up with honesty. Own your mistakes. And remember that in any courtroom, any boardroom, any room where accountability matters, the truth has a way of winning. And no amount of fake legal documents can change that fundamental fact. Karen looked Judge Judy dead in the eye and said, "I don't owe him anything." Then Judy reached into her bag and pulled out the receipts. You won't believe what just unfolded in one of the most explosive courtroom moments ever caught on camera. Picture this, the overhead lights blazing down on courtroom 5A, the gallery packed with spectators leaning forward in their seats, and cameras rolling as they captured every single second. Karen Mitchell strutted into that courtroom like she owned the place, her designer purse swinging from her shoulder, her heels clicking against the polished floor with the kind of confidence that said she'd already won. Across from her stood Marcus Johnson, a hard-working man clutching a worn manila folder stuffed with documents, his jaw clenched tight, frustration written all over his face like he'd been carrying this burden for months. Judge Judy sat at her bench, that famous no-nonsense expression locked in place, her sharp eyes moving between the two of them like a hawk sizing up its prey. What happened next didn't just settle a dispute. It became a masterclass in why you should never ever try to outsmart Judge Judy, especially when the evidence of your lies is sitting right there in your $3,000 handbag. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Before we dive into this wild courtroom showdown that left the entire gallery gasping and social media absolutely losing its mind, Drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from. Are you Team Marcus or were you initially fooled by Karen's performance? And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to stay locked in for more jaw-dropping moments of justice, served like this one. Because trust me, you're going to want to see how this train wreck unfolds. Judge Judy leaned back in her leather chair, the American flag standing tall behind her as she flipped open the case file with that signature impatience that told everyone in the room she wasn't here for games or excuses. The bailiff, standing rigid near the witness stand, cleared his throat and announced in a booming voice, "The case of Johnson versus Mitchell. The plaintiff is suing for $2,500, claiming the defendant borrowed money for car repairs and has refused to pay it back for 6 months." The gallery murmured, a wave of whispers rippling through the rows of spectators who'd come hoping for exactly this kind of drama. Judge Judy looked up from her papers, her reading glasses perched on her nose, and gestured toward Marcus with a flick of her hand. "All right, Mr. Johnson, tell me why we're here today and make it quick." "I don't have all day." Marcus stepped forward, his shoulders squared but his voice trembling slightly with emotion as he began to speak, the kind of shake that comes from someone who's been wronged and is finally getting their chance to be heard. "Your Honor, 6 months ago, Karen called me in a panic. Her car had completely broken down. She was stranded, desperate, and she begged me to help her." He paused, his hand gripping the folder tighter, knuckles turning white. "We were friends. Good friends. I trusted her. So when she asked me for $2,500 to get her car fixed, promising she'd pay me back in 30 days, I didn't hesitate. I went to my bank that same day, withdrew the cash, and handed it to her in person." His voice cracked just slightly on those last words, the pain of betrayal seeping through as he continued. "Now 6 months later, she won't return my calls. She blocks my messages. She acts like I don't even exist. Your Honor, I'm not a rich man. That money meant something to me, and she knew that." The courtroom fell into a heavy silence, the kind that hangs in the air when everyone's holding their breath, waiting to see what comes next. A woman in the third row wiped at her eye, clearly moved by Marcus's story, while a man near the back shook his head in disgust, already forming his opinion about Karen before she'd even opened her mouth. Judge Judy, never one to let emotion cloud the facts, cut through the moment with razor-sharp precision. "Very touching, Mr. Johnson, but I don't deal in feelings. I deal in facts. Where's your proof that you actually gave her this money? Do you have a contract? A text message? A signed agreement? Anything?" Marcus, prepared for this exact question, reached into his manila folder and pulled out a crisp white piece of paper, holding it up like a lawyer presenting Exhibit A. "Right here, Your Honor. This is my bank withdrawal slip from March 15th. $2,500 in cash, withdrawn from my savings account." He walked forward and handed it to the bailiff, who carried it up to Judge Judy's bench. She snatched it from his hand, her eyes scanning the document with the speed of someone who'd reviewed 10,000 pieces of evidence in her career. The date was clear. The amount was exact. The bank stamp official. Judge Judy nodded slowly, placing the slip down on her desk before turning her attention to the defendant's table where Karen sat, her perfectly manicured nails drumming lightly against the wood, that designer purse sitting right beside her like a silent witness to everything that was about to unfold. "All right, Ms. Mitchell," Judge Judy said, her voice dripping with skepticism as she leaned forward, elbows on the bench, fingers steepled like she was about to dismantle someone's entire existence. "Did this man give you $2,500 on March 15th, yes or no?" The gallery leaned in collectively, the energy in the room shifting as all eyes turned to Karen, waiting to hear how she'd respond to such a direct question. Karen stood up slowly, smoothing down her blazer with a practiced motion, her face arranging itself into an expression of calm innocence that would have convinced a less experienced judge. But this wasn't just any judge. This was Judy Scheindlin. And she'd seen this performance 1,000 times before from 1,000 different liars who thought they were clever enough to beat the system. "Your Honor," Karen began, her voice sweet and measured like honey dripping from a spoon, "with all due respect to Mr. Johnson and his version of events, I need to be very clear about something." She paused for effect, letting the tension build, her eyes sweeping across the courtroom as if she were the victim in all of this. "I don't owe him anything. Not a single penny." The gallery erupted in shocked gasps and scattered murmurs, some people glancing at each other in confusion, while others sat back in their seats, arms crossed, clearly sensing that something much bigger was brewing beneath the surface of Karen's confident denial. Karen took a step closer to the bench, her confidence radiating through the courtroom like she'd rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror 100 times. She tilted her head slightly, that designer purse still sitting on the table behind her, and placed her hand over her heart in a gesture of sincerity that would have won her an Oscar if this were a movie instead of a courtroom. "Your Honor, Marcus did give me money. I'm not denying that. But what he's conveniently leaving out is the context of our relationship at that time." She glanced over at Marcus with a look that mixed pity and condescension, like she was about to expose his deepest secret. We weren't just friends. We were dating. And that money? It was a gift, not a loan. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Whispers turned into full conversations as spectators turned to each other, eyebrows raised, phones coming out to record this twist. Marcus's face went bright red, his mouth dropping open as he shouted from his spot. That's a complete lie. We were never dating. But Karen just smiled, that infuriating smile of someone who knows exactly what they're doing, and turned back to Judge Judy without missing a beat. Your Honor, I understand he's embarrassed now, but the truth is Marcus was pursuing me romantically for months. He took me out to dinner constantly, bought me gifts, and when my car broke down, he specifically said, and I quote, "Don't worry about paying me back, babe. I want to help you. I want to take care of you." She emphasized those last words, her voice dripping with manufactured emotion. Judge Judy's eyebrow arched up so high it nearly reached her hairline, her expression shifting from skeptical to thoroughly unimpressed. So you're telling me this was a romantic gesture? A gift from a boyfriend to his girlfriend? Karen nodded enthusiastically, her hands gesturing as she painted her version of reality. Exactly, Your Honor. But when I realized we weren't compatible and I ended things, he got bitter, angry, and suddenly this gift that he freely gave became a loan he wanted back. It's classic scorned lover behavior. A few people in the gallery actually nodded at this, their expressions softening slightly, as they considered this alternative narrative. One woman near the front whispered to her companion, "I mean, that does happen sometimes." Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, her fingers drumming on the armrest as she studied Karen with the intensity of a detective who'd just spotted a crack in a suspect's alibi. Interesting story, Ms. Mitchell, very interesting. So tell me, do you have any proof whatsoever that this was a gift and not a loan? Any text messages where he said you didn't have to pay him back? Any witnesses to this supposed romantic relationship? Anything at all? Karen's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. So quick most people missed it. But Judge Judy caught it like a shark smelling blood in the water. Karen shifted her weight from one designer heel to the other, her hand instinctively moving to touch the strap of her purse, before she caught herself and pulled it back. Your Honor, how do you prove a spoken conversation between two people in private? He never asked me to sign anything. There was no contract because it was a gift given freely out of affection. Her voice carried just the right amount of defensiveness, like someone who'd been wrongly accused and was trying to maintain their dignity. The absence of a loan agreement proves my point. If this was really a loan like he claims, wouldn't a responsible person have gotten it in writing? A few heads in the gallery nodded at this logic, the scales of opinion tipping slightly back in her direction. But Judge Judy wasn't buying it. Not for a second. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she removed her glasses and pointed them directly at Karen like a weapon. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. In my 30-plus years on the bench, I've heard every excuse, every lie, every creative story people cook up to avoid paying what they owe. And you know what I've learned? She paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. Liars always have one thing in common. They focus on what can't be proven instead of what can. The gallery fell silent, everyone sensing that Judge Judy was about to pounce. So let me ask you something else. You claim you needed this money desperately for car repairs because you were broke and stranded. Correct? Karen nodded slowly, unsure where this was heading. Yes, Your Honor. I was in a terrible situation. Judge Judy's lips curved into that knowing smile that every defendant dreads, the one that says she's already 10 steps ahead and you just walked right into her trap. Then explained to me how someone who was so desperately broke they had to beg for $2,500 is walking into my courtroom 6 months later carrying a Gucci handbag that retails for over $3,000. She gestured toward the defendant's table where the bag sat, its gold hardware gleaming under the courtroom lights like a spotlight on Karen's lies. The gallery erupted. Gasps echoed through the room, people pointing and whispering, phones rising higher to capture Karen's reaction. One man in a suit stood up slightly, craning his neck to get a better look at the infamous purse that had just become the star witness. Karen's face flushed red, her confident demeanor cracking like thin ice under pressure. This was a gift from my mother. Your Honor, it has nothing to do with Marcus or the money. Her voice had lost that smooth, practiced quality, now tinged with panic as she realized Judge Judy had spotted something she hadn't prepared for. Judge Judy wasn't done. She leaned back, crossing her arms, her expression shifting from skeptical to downright predatory. A gift from your mother. How convenient. Tell me, Ms. Mitchell, when exactly did your car break down? What month? Karen blinked, her mind visibly racing as she tried to recall the lie she'd built. It was March, I think. Or maybe early April. It was around that time. Marcus jumped in, his voice stronger now, sensing the tide turning. It was March 15th, Your Honor. The exact same day I withdrew the money and gave it to her. Judge Judy nodded, her eyes never leaving Karen's face, watching every micro-expression, every nervous tick. March 15th. Does that sound right to you, Ms. Mitchell? Karen swallowed hard, her hand unconsciously moving back to her purse, clutching it slightly. Yes, March 15th sounds about right. Your Honor? Karen stammered, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the defendant's table, that expensive purse now sitting there like a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Judge Judy leaned forward, her eyes locked on Karen's hand as it nervously fidgeted near the bag's leather strap. You keep touching that purse, Ms. Mitchell. Why is that? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade, and Karen's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing but no words coming out. I don't know what you mean, Your Honor. I'm just nervous. Judge Judy's expression hardened into solid steel. Bailiff, bring me that bag. The courtroom exploded into chaos. The gallery erupted with gasps and excited chatter, people standing up to get a better view as the bailiff moved toward the defendant's table. Karen's eyes went wide with pure panic, her hand shooting out to grab the purse protectively. Your Honor, you can't just search my personal property. That's a violation of my privacy. Her voice had gone shrill, desperate. All pretense of calm sophistication shattered like glass. Judge Judy slammed her hand on the bench, the sound cracking through the room like thunder. This is my courtroom, and when someone is lying to my face while clutching their purse like it contains the crown jewels, I have every right to see what's inside. Bailiff now. The bailiff reached the table and Karen had no choice but to release her death grip on the bag, her hands trembling as she watched him carry her designer purse up to Judge Judy's bench, like he was delivering evidence in a murder trial. The entire gallery fell into breathless silence, every eye glued to Judge Judy's hands as she unzipped the bag with deliberate slowness, building the tension until it was almost unbearable. She reached inside, pulling out items one by one. Let's see what we have here: wallet, cell phone, lipstick, car keys, sunglasses. Each item was placed on the bench methodically, and with each one, Karen's breathing grew faster, her face losing more color. Then Judge Judy's hand stopped. Her fingers closed around a folded piece of paper deep in the bottom of the bag. She pulled it out slowly, dramatically, holding it up to the light as the courtroom held its collective breath. And what do we have here? She unfolded the paper with agonizing slowness, her reading glasses sliding back onto her nose as she began to read. The silence was so complete you could hear the air conditioning humming. Judge Judy's voice cut through the quiet like a knife. A promissory note, dated March 15th, signed by Karen Mitchell. She looked up, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. I, Karen Mitchell, agree to repay Marcus Johnson the sum of $2,500 within 30 days of this date for car repair expenses. Signed, Karen Mitchell. The courtroom detonated. People jumped to their feet, shouting and pointing. Marcus's face transformed from anxious hope to pure vindication, his eyes filling with tears. Karen stood frozen at the defendant's table, her mouth hanging open, no words coming out as the signed promissory note sat on Judge Judy's bench like a smoking gun that had just blown her entire defense to pieces. The gallery was in absolute chaos, people shouting over each other, phones held high, capturing every second of Karen's complete and total destruction. One woman near the front screamed, "She had it the whole time! She's been lying this entire time," while a man in the back row stood up applauding, his voice booming through the courtroom. Get her, Judge. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. Not even close. She held up her hand, silencing the room with nothing but that commanding presence that had made her a legend, and reached back into the purse with a look on her face that said she knew there was more to find. Oh, we're not done yet, Judge Judy said, her voice dripping with disgust as she pulled out another receipt. This one crumpled and shoved into a side pocket like Karen had tried to forget it existed. She smoothed it out on her bench, her eyes scanning it quickly before looking up with an expression of pure contempt. A receipt from Tony's Auto Repair, dated March 16th, one day after Marcus gave you the money. Total cost of repairs, $1,800. She let that number hang in the air for a moment, watching Karen squirm before reaching back into the bag one more time. And here's another receipt. Nordstrom, dated March 20th, just 5 days after you got this supposed emergency money. Total purchase $1,200. The courtroom went absolutely ballistic, the noise level rising to a fever pitch as people screamed their outrage and disbelief. Judge Judy stood up from her bench, something she rarely did, her small frame somehow filling the entire courtroom with the weight of her authority and anger. So let me make sure I understand this correctly, Ms. Mitchell. Marcus gave you $2,500 for emergency car repairs. Your car repairs cost $1,800. And instead of paying him back the remaining $700 or even calling him to say thank you, you went on a shopping spree at Nordstrom 5 days later and spent $1,200 that you clearly didn't have? Her voice was rising with each word, her finger pointing at Karen like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. You stood in my courtroom, looked me in the eye, and told me you didn't owe him anything. You made up an elaborate story about a romantic relationship that never existed. And all this time you had a signed promissory note in your purse proving you knew exactly what you owed. Karen finally found her voice, tears streaming down her face now, her mascara running in black streaks as she tried desperately to salvage something, anything from the wreckage of her lies. Your Honor, please, I was going to pay him back. I just needed more time. I forgot that note was even in there. I made a mistake, but... Judge Judy cut her off with a sharp motion of her hand, her face a mask of disappointment and fury. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to lie. You chose to spend money that wasn't yours. You chose to ignore someone who helped you when you were desperate. And then you chose to come into my courtroom and waste everyone's time with your performance. She sat back down, pulling the case file toward her and picking up her pen with finality. Judgment for the plaintiff, Marcus Johnson, in the full amount of $2,500 plus court costs of $250. Her voice was clear and absolute, no room for argument or appeal. Furthermore, Ms. Mitchell, your behavior in this courtroom has been reprehensible. You lied under oath, you concealed evidence, and you attempted to manipulate this court with false testimony. You should be absolutely ashamed of yourself. She picked up her gavel, and the sound of it slamming down echoed through the courtroom like a judge's hammer sealing Karen's fate. We're done here. Dismissed. The gallery erupted into thunderous applause, people standing and clapping as Marcus broke down in tears of relief, his hands covering his face as months of frustration and betrayal finally found justice. Karen grabbed her purse, now empty of its incriminating contents which Judge Judy kept as evidence, and practically ran from the courtroom, her heels clicking frantically against the floor as she pushed past the bailiff and disappeared through the doors. The cameras followed her into the hallway where reporters swarmed like bees, microphones thrust in her face, but she kept her head down, refusing to comment, her hand up trying to block the cameras as she fled toward the exit. Back inside, Marcus stood at the plaintiff's table, the bailiff handing him a tissue as he wiped his eyes, his voice choked with emotion as he spoke. Thank you, Your Honor, thank you so much. I just wanted what was fair. I just wanted the truth to come out. Can you believe Karen tried to hide that evidence in her own purse and then lied about it to Judge Judy's face? Drop a comment below sharing your reaction to this unbelievable reveal. Were you shocked by the receipts? And if you're loving this courtroom justice, and smash that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see what happens when you try to outsmart Judge Judy. Within 24 hours, the clip of Karen's courtroom meltdown exploded across every social media platform imaginable, racking up over 2 million views as people couldn't get enough of watching Judge Judy pull those receipts out of that designer bag and destroy Karen's lies piece by piece. The comment section became a digital courtroom of its own, with thousands of people weighing in. The audacity to keep the signed note in her purse while lying, one user wrote, getting 50,000 likes. Another commented, "This is why you don't mess with Judge Judy, she's undefeated for a reason." The hashtag Dare Receipts in the Bag trended nationwide, with legal experts and everyday people alike dissecting every moment of the case, turning it into a viral lesson about honesty, accountability, and the importance of documentation. But beyond the social media frenzy and the millions of views, this case taught us something deeper about human nature and justice. Marcus walked out of that courtroom vindicated. Not just because he got his money back, but because the truth he'd been carrying for 6 months was finally acknowledged and validated. He'd done everything right. He kept his bank receipt. He stayed calm under pressure, and most importantly, he stood up for himself when someone tried to take advantage of his kindness. Karen, on the other hand, learned the hardest lesson of her life. She didn't just lose $2,750 in that courtroom. She lost her reputation, her dignity, and became a cautionary tale watched by millions about what happens when you think you're clever enough to beat the system. The real power of this moment wasn't just in Judge Judy's brilliant detective work or Karen's spectacular downfall. It was in the reminder that documentation matters, truth matters, and integrity is worth more than any amount of money you might try to steal. Like Marcus, always keep your receipts, stand firm in your truth, and trust that justice will find a way. Like Judge Judy, trust your instincts, dig deeper when something doesn't add up, and never let someone's performance distract you from the facts. And unlike Karen, remember that lies have a shelf life, but the truth is eternal, especially when you're literally carrying the evidence of your deception around in your $3,000 handbag. So what did this incredible courtroom showdown teach you about trust, money, and standing up for what's right? Drop your biggest takeaway in the comments below. And if Judge Judy's no-nonsense justice inspired you as much as it inspired us, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another moment of truth prevailing over lies. Thanks for watching, and remember, always keep your receipts, but maybe don't keep the ones that prove you're a liar.